are absolutely the perfect example of more is more. It's always been about going a little further than everybody else would safely go. And it comes, that applies to our instruments, like you're saying, 7-string guitars, 6-string bass, million-piece drum kits, as well as the songwriting. The songs are 8, 10, 12, 20, 40 minutes long. Sometimes, you got to take the clock off the wall and let a song just be what it naturally wants to become.
Welcome back, scholars and mathematicians. As you could tell from the shirt, by the glasses, I am of course a fucking genius because I listen to prog music, so everything I'm going to say, I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Now, to all you Dream Theater fans out there, don't worry, I'm a Dream Theater fan myself, but the whole thing is that of all the rabid fan bases out there, Dream Theater is one of the absolute worst fan bases because everyone thinks they're the smartest blowhard on the planet. Oh, you don't like that song because you don't have any fucking brain cells, you stupid mongoloid. Oh. Now, the truth is that every human, including yourselves, is actually a fucking moron, some kid or retard. But look, we're all adults here, unless you're a kid. But we need to understand that people have different opinions. I don't have a gun pointed at my head saying I have to like every album or every single song, so I'm gonna have my own fucking opinions and own biases. If you can't fucking stand that, you get the fuck out. That being said though, I do really like Dream Theater, and I know a lot of my fan base that are just pure metalheads are gonna kind of take issue with this video, or a lot of people that just don't like the whole technical prog wanky thing. But I tell you, give this episode and this band a chance. I guarantee you there'll be a couple albums that you could probably really get into. The band was actually formed at Berklee Music College by, of course, Mike Portnoy, which is one of my favorite drummers of all time. A dude with absolute fucking attitude in a good and bad way sometimes, as well as pure charisma. Whatever you want to say about this, he has personally always been my favorite member of the band. Not because I have huge biases and all this crazy shit towards him, it's because he just is the funniest, most interesting dude from the band, and I think he writes the best lyrics, and he's really good at composing some of the songs. And then you have the bassist that's basically a fucking mime how little he talks, John Mayung, who's this Asian dude that's just always going crazy on the bass and pure silence, but it's brooding sounds, like he could just fucking whoop your ass, because this dude is like a black belt and fucking whatever. Then you have John Petrucci, of course. A lot of people say this dude is the Wankmeister. He might be worse than Yngwie. Some people, you know what? I've made an entire video devoted on highlighting the absolute most soulful guitar solos from this guy, and there's tons of them. This guy is one of the most diverse guitar players. Sure, he likes to show off his abilities, but he does know when to tone it down. He knows when to craft a good fucking song and a good goddamn solo.
Okay, so I'm pretty much amazing.
Now this trio was working out a lot of metal, progressive songs and whatnot, and throwing in tons of influences into a melting pot, but they needed more band members because none of these three could fucking sing. I mean, we've heard them do backing vocals later down the road, which as gang vocals they kind of work, but I mean, Jesus Christ, John Petrucci, you cannot sing. So they got one of John Petrucci's childhood friends, Kevin Moore, to play keyboards. He's a very diverse, unique player. I don't usually pay too much attention to keyboard players, but honestly, Kevin Moore is one of the most unique ones. I won't say he's one of the best of the best. He's a great songwriter, but he has a great tone and he's really fucking unique. And he really fit in with this era of the band. And they got another childhood friend of John Petrucci's named Charles Collins.
Sorry, I'm fucked up. His name is Chris Collins, not Charles Collins.
Who they didn't think could sing at first, but then he did a cover of Queen of the Reich and blew them all away. And they formed this band as Majesty, not Dream Theater at first. They made a demo, and honestly, these early songs were alright, but the problem is Charles Collins could kind of hit the notes, but he didn't have an actual good singing voice. Thankfully though, they did have problems with him, so he was out of the band, and then they got a much older guy by the name of Charlie Dominici, who was very much like a soul singer, and a lot of people really don't like him and will dismiss the first album because he's on it, and it's the only album that doesn't have James LaBrie singing. But honestly, if you really look at it, he is a great singer. He's just really, really in the wrong place. Then they were threatened with a lawsuit by another band named Majesty, so they changed the name to Dream Theater, which was actually inspired by a name that Mike Portnoy's dad had come up with. Now, Mike Portnoy's family plays a huge role in the lyric writing as well as a big portions of the history of the band, as well as Mike himself. But funnily enough, they have a logo, Dream Theater, called the Majesty symbol, so they kept a little bit of that old Majesty type of aesthetic thing. But what's funny is apparently the Majesty logo has every single letter of Charlie Dominici's name hidden into it. But nevertheless, they put out their first album, which I think is a really underrated one.
The record deal, our first record deal, came to us. So we signed our first deal, which was with Mechanic Records, and we did When Dream and Day Unite, our first album.
Now this album turns away a lot of Dream Theater fans. A lot of them view it as the absolute worst album. I don't think so at all. But it's hard to disagree with that one. That fucking album cover might be the gayest thing I've ever seen. I mean, what the fuck were they thinking with that shit? Now this is one of the few Dream Theater albums that if you hate the wanky Dream Theater thing, you might actually like this album. Sure, there's a lot of proggy moments on it, but there's a lot of just straight up metal riffage throughout it. They were supposed to have music videos and singles for the song Status Seeker. It's a pretty damn good song, and my favorite song on the album, the riffy as hell, metal as fuck, Afterlife. You also have some very progressive epics on it, of course. The One Who Helped to Set the Sun and The Killing Hand, which is probably the standout of the more progressive songs. But it really showed the limitations of Charlie's voice, where he's trying to hit these high notes and it just kind of goes flat. Now, like I said, the instrumentation is toned down a bit for a lot of these songs, with the exceptions, of course, the epic songs. But they, of course, blow their fucking loads on the instrumental track known as the Yitsy Jam.
Let's clear this up. Yitsy Jam. Most of you figured it out, but for those of you that haven't, we used to be called Majesty. If you took this bass drum head or any other thing that said Yitsy Jam, held it up to the mirror, I wish you could see through this, but if you notice, YTSEJAM, Yitsy Jam.
Sadly, even though this underrated album is fucking incredible, the fans didn't give a fuck, the normies didn't give a fuck, the label didn't give a fuck. So basically the album went up like the hidden bird.
The record label didn't really do anything with it, so we never toured. We didn't have a lot of support.
They promised to make a video, they promised to put us on tour, and all those promises were just empty promises. Nothing ever happened.
And Charlie's voice was starting to give him problems, especially during the live tour for this album. They split with him and everything was all good, and he came back actually for an anniversary show. So the rest of the four were pretty much in limbo, creating a lot of their early classic songs, which we would hear on the next couple albums. At this time, they were auditioning a bunch of different singers, one of them being one of my all-time favorite singers from Fates Warning, John Arch. And honestly, you would have really fit with this band. Check this out. Then they tried out a guy named Steve Stone that really didn't work. They kept saying, we need a singer like Bruce Dickinson, So then he started to literally mimic Bruce Dickinson and said something to the effect of one of the live shows, "Scream for Me Long Beach," which is of course from the whole classic Live After Death thing. But of course they weren't at Long Beach, so I don't know what the hell he was thinking with that. Then they finally got a demo tape from a really shitty band called Winter Rose, the singer named James LaBrie, at the time known as Kevin LaBrie, but they had a Kevin Moore and they already had two Johns, so they changed his name to James LaBrie.
Pulled out his picture and he had the look we were looking for. Wow, this guy's really good looking too, man. You know, he had a great voice and he looked good. Oh, he must be an asshole, you know. We fly him out, he's a cool guy. He really got along with us.
They flew me down, rehearsed, jammed with them, and that's it. The rest is history.
With this new classic lineup, they weaseled their way out of that shitty label deal even though they were supposed to make another group of albums, and they signed with Atco, which had a bunch of connections to bigger labels. So they had a much bigger budget, they had a little bit more time, and they were ready to put out a much more polished, in fact, even kind of big budget pop sounding album. But nevertheless, they had no idea what would happen next.
In '92, really all of the bands from the '80s, like Metallica, Maiden, Queensryche, they were starting to stray to more commercial stuff. Metallica was doing the Black Album, Queensryche was doing Empire. So the prog metal bands weren't really doing it anymore. You had the underground bands like Fates Warning and Watchtower, but none of them had a major label push. And really the mainstream stuff in the metal world was starting to turn to the more grunge stuff, So when Images and Words came out in '92, suddenly here we were on a major label, a metal band, but with real prog elements.
It was a dream come true. We were playing Boston for the first time, Minneapolis for the first time, Detroit for the first time, Dallas for the first time, Phoenix. We were just everywhere we went, places we never thought we would play. And that was even before the record blew up. Just to get there was awesome. But then all of a sudden, Pull Me Under started to catch on. And when we were doing all those drives in the van, suddenly we were hearing Pull Me Under everywhere we went.
So the band and label took a huge chance on this album. But despite this album being a huge success for the band and one of their classic albums, in fact I might even say their best album, the album actually had a lot of turmoil in the studio, especially with the producer David Prater, who was constantly butting heads not only with the band but especially Mike Portnoy. He would lock them out of the studio, he would dictate everything on how it sounded despite them wanting to sound a certain way. In fact, he would even fuck with some of the instruments and stuff like that. Overall the product sounded great. But the one thing that does bug me is the thing that Mike and David butted heads over constantly, which was the drum sound.
Probably the biggest contentious kind of aspect of the album, and I really love the drum sound on the album, but is how Mike felt about his drums being triggered, the snare drum being triggered, and certain sensitive notes, ghost notes and things like that being translated into full volume notes that weren't. So it's like somebody taking your playing and almost taking the dynamics out of it.
Now in classic Dream Theater fashion, they wanted this album to be like a double album in length, really fucking long. But once again, the label fucked them over on this, and they pretty much said, hey, you can't put those songs in there. They left out a lot of classic material, including the really good epic song, A Change of Seasons, which we'll talk about in a bit. But once again, despite all this studio infighting, this is actually arguably their best album. And if you want to get into Dream Theater, especially with more toned down, I would say start with this album. Although there's a lot of wanky instrumentation, it actually really works the music. The instrumentation is actually very, very, very interesting. It's really cool to see how it goes. And a lot of the songs are actually stripped down without crazy instrumentals. So I guess if you're really, really, really avidly against, prog wanking stuff going on, you'll at least like half the album. Everyone knows the single, the opening song, Pull Me Under, which was by happenstance a big hit off the album because college radio was playing it all over the place and everyone really started to catch on to it. All of a sudden it was blowing up the charts even though it wasn't even a single for the album. So then they quickly had to scramble together a really god-awful music video that makes no sense. And they even scrambled together 2 other music videos for what were supposed to be singles. You have Another Day, which is kind of like a Christmas sounding song. And then you have the other single, my favorite song on the album, one of their big epic hits. You have Take the Time, which actually has a bit of a Michael Jackson funky influence in there. Now with songs like Take the Time and even the big epics like Learning to Live and of course Metropolis Part 1, Miracle in the Sleeper, the instrumental sections are showing a lot of diversity musically. They're throwing caution to the wind. They're doing all different types of things. And especially on Learning to Live, I mean, you have a Spanish guitar solo, you have a lot of bass lines, and you have that crazy unison at the end, which is probably the best part of the whole album. And then, like I said, Metropolis, Miracle in the Sleeper. A lot of people that really hate Dream Theater wank will hate this song for sure. But what's funny is the title, Metropolis Part 1, Miracle in the Sleeper, was actually meant as a joke. They never intended on actually following it up, but everyone kept asking about it, and they eventually did follow it up. Now, the last song I do want to mention is another one of my favorite songs in the album, Under a Glass Moon. Not only just because it's amazing riffs, great songwriting, incredible singing from James, and that's right, from this era, James was one of the best metal fucking singers. Sadly, that would change. I mostly want to feature this song because of John Petrucci's guitar solo. It's arguably his best of all time because he goes from shred to jazz to blues to classical, all without breaking a sweat and all without the listener noticing that it sounds jarring at all. It actually flows perfectly. It really shows the musical diversity of John Petrucci. Now, this album exploded while the band was on tour, so they had to keep rushing in and making music videos and going back on tour and shit, and they were doing a huge world tour at this point. But this album pretty much put them in a difficult situation, because Pull Me Under was an accidental hit, and they didn't want that to represent them, and the whole album, Images and Words, although there's some songs that kind of run together a little bit because they're more metal-oriented with some progressive elements, they still threw caution to the wind. A lot of the songs were really different. So they took a huge risk with the next album because they really did not want to repeat themselves, even though the label wanted another Pull Me Under. They decided to do something completely outside of the box.
So it's the first time we ever had to write an album with a clock ticking and knowing that there was a fan base waiting to hear it.
これからも日本で頑張ってください。期待してます。
Said I don't like Dream Theater that much, but I had a pen and some paper, so what the fuck.
Now, Awake, as you can see, I'm wearing a shirt of it. It is probably my favorite Dream Theater album cover, and this is when they really started to incorporate a lot of the songs and themes into the album cover. Now, where Images and Words was super diverse, this one is probably even more diverse. Completely black to white. You have motherfucking heavy as hell moments, throwing in a lot of heavy alternative metal influences, and then you have really, really melodic, soft moments that are way softer than anything on Images and Words, and arguably softer than anything they've ever done. I mean, the album starts out with jazz, then it goes to fucking prog rock, then it goes to hair metal of all things, then classical, then some more alternative metal, some more symphonic stuff. It is all over the goddamn place. So because of this, it's actually hard for me to recommend this album because it's just so fucking black and white. But if you really like the experimentation side of this band, you'll really like this album. And if you like the more stripped down approach, you might actually like a lot of this album. Now, although there wasn't as much fighting in the studio for this album, Kevin Moore was very distant with the band, and they just kind of weren't getting along with him. He wasn't really contributing as much. He definitely killed it on this album, but you could see that there was going to be some problems ahead.
Kev was kind of growing distant to us personally, and musically he was more interested in the independence of working on his own as opposed to the compromising involved in a band environment.
Way with you.
But Kevin was considering leaving the band and eventually did, and told us so while we were recording the record. So it was very weird. You know, the timing was weird, the whole thing was weird.
You know, we had worked and struggled and persevered for all those years. Finally, the ball was rolling, and then one of the members is going to walk away. It was a devastating blow for us.
Many have speculated why he left. I think it mostly has to do with him not getting along with especially Mike Portnoy, him not liking their musical direction, I guess, not liking how the album was produced, and he also really did not like the fame. He didn't like the attention. He just seems like a very reclusive person that doesn't want to stay in a group for that long. I mean, you could kind of see that the seeds were planted even from the beginning with lyrics like Light Fuse and Get Away, and even some of the lyrics on this album are about this whole falling out. But what I find very odd is that Kevin Moore had always said he left because he didn't like the musical direction, which is weird because he would then, almost immediately after, join Fate's Warning and continue playing prog metal. So I don't know what the fuck was going on there. I mostly chalk it up to that he hated the fame, he hated the attention, he didn't like being in that group for too long, and you could tell he just really didn't get along with Mike Portnoy. When Jim Matheos of Fate's Warning did a project with Mike Portnoy and Kevin Moore, Mike Portnoy said he was super excited to get along with Kevin Moore again, but he said that Kevin Moore was like kind of douchey and distant toward him, so I think it's just the two didn't like each other. Fuck it, let's get on with the songs. You have an amazing opener, 6 O'Clock, which I said lyrically is about his falling out with the band. Now this song, as well as a bunch of other songs, the album actually showcase a unique vocal approach from James LaBrie, trying to not repeat himself like he did in the last album, and instead do something more visceral and more harsh.
So many ways to drown a man, so many ways to drag him down. Some are fighting, some take years and years.
Now you have a lot of darker, heavier songs in the album, like Scarred, which is a great epic song. Then you have the double heavy assault of Mirror and Lie. Now these were supposed to be one song, one big epic song, but James LaBrie said that Lie should be its own song on its own. They pretty much made that like the single and everything, and that was a real groovy, heavy song, kind of inspired by like alternative metal and Pantera type stuff. But the song Mirror is really important because this is the first time that Mike Portnoy was lyrically talking about his struggle with alcoholism, which would come up a lot more later. Then you have the really weird A Mind Beside Itself trilogy. Now, you could tell they were having frustrations with the label. They didn't want to try to argue to put another 20-minute song there, so they thought, let's put like almost a hidden 20-minute song. Let's take 3 songs that go together, but break them all apart. You have an instrumental that's really crazy and long. It has tons of wanky stuff. Then you have an epic song called Voices, which is probably my favorite song on the album. Mostly due not only to the epic arrangements, the amazing keyboard playing, but my favorite thing about the song is James LaBrie's incredible fucking singing. And then you cap the 3-piece song out with, of course, The Silent Man, which is another single, and it was a really soft, really weird song for them. Now the album ends with a really, really weird, lengthy song called Space Divest, which is totally a Kevin Moore song lyrically and musically. Now Mike Portnoy has gone on record saying that if Kevin Moore had told them he was going to leave the band during the writing sessions instead of the mixing sessions, that he would have told the band remove Space Divest. But honestly, I think it's a good song. A lot of Dream Theater fans really, really like the song, but my problem is that a lot of the fans act like Kevin Moore is this fucking genius and that this is the greatest thing ever. It's just a cool piano song with a cool, different feel throughout each movement. It's not too many movements. It's not groundbreaking material here, guys. It's a very keyboard-heavy song for like 7 minutes. In fact, sometimes I'd argue it's kind of boring. Whatever. I think Kevin Moore's a little overrated as a songwriter. Of course, I love him. Of course, I think he's a great keyboard player and all. But he's not a fucking genius, okay? Now, the album sold well, but not nearly as well as Images and Words, and this really pissed off the label. But they went on tour, and they had to get a new keyboardist. They auditioned a guy named Jordan Rudess, who, of course, you would know he'd eventually join the band and became their classic keyboard player. But it just wasn't working out. He was already in other projects. It just wasn't gelling well. So they got a guy named Derek Sherinian to join the tour, then eventually joined the band for a short while. Now, I used to hate Derek, not as a person, of course, but as a musician. But honestly, I think he's one of the more unique members of the band. He's this much more throw caution to the wind raw player that was a lot less focused on wanky instrumentation and much more on like really good songwriting, really good riffs, and like I said, just raw attitude. Now, as many Dream Theater fans know, this tour brought on the infamous incident with James LaBrie and his food poisoning. He had horribly vomited several times, apparently blew out his vocal cords and shit like that. And according to him, they hadn't fully healed until 6 Degrees. But you know what? I kind of call some bullshit with this whole story because his voice obviously was struggling on the tour after that, so you could tell something had happened. But it's not like the voice had fully recovered. I always noticed it just kind of remained a little more flat from that point on. And then it's only in recent times that it's really gone way downhill. It only seems a lot better on a lot of the official live recordings because you could tell they overdubbed shit, especially vocally. But James's voice is always, for the most part, after this incident, remained pretty flatlined. Now, also at this time, there was a lot of bootlegs going around of live performances and demos of a Change of Season song, which was supposed to end up on Images and Words. So the band was almost kind of forced to record a new version of the song, finally put it out. And in Dream Theater fashion, they couldn't just put out one fucking song in an EP. They had to make the EP like 50 goddamn minutes. So they threw on a bunch of other cover songs. Now this song, bringing it back to the whole Mike Portnoy's family thing, is a very emotional song about Mike's mom dying, the last time he spoke to her and all this stuff. And there's a lot of cool sound bites brought in from one of my favorite movies, Dead Poet Society, which is a really sad movie as well. But it's a really cool, epic song. A lot of fans think it's like the greatest thing they ever did, but honestly, I like the Kevin Moore version that they did a lot better. Not because I'm this fucking Kevin Moore blowhard, as you guys know. I just said I think he's a little overrated. I will admit that the new chorus is a lot better, because the original chorus is just these weird straining high notes that kind of didn't make any sense. But what really matters to me is the apex of the song, the climax, the guitar solo from John Petrucci, and the unison, which is completely butchered in the redone version. You can tell that Kevin Moore had wrote those parts. The original guitar solo from John Petrucci was much more inspired by the guitar solo of La Villa Strangiata by Rush, where it just kind of kept building up, getting more intense. And then right when it hit that point, the breaking point, him and Kevin Moore did an incredible keyboard and guitar unison that went into like a classical break. It was the best thing that they have ever done, probably. It was so incredible, it blew my fucking mind. But the version with Derek Sherinian, it just feels really lazy. A lot of people think this is John's best guitar solo, but it just kind of meanders. It doesn't really have a good flow, it doesn't have a good apex, not nearly as much as the original version. Now, the band was working on tons of material at this time, lots of experimentation, incorporating some sounds at the time, and they wrote, once again, a fucking double album length of material, tons of songs that would eventually be left off due to studio interference, stuff we wrote due to studio interference. In fact, they even wrote a damn near 20-minute song called Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from Memory, which never actually got vocal treatment, it was just demoed. And this song actually went on to be several parts of the Scenes from Memory album, which we'll get into a bit, which was mostly Strange Deja Vu, the overture, Dance of Eternity bits of that, and then I think One Last Time. And there's some other bits in there, but those were most of the songs formed out of that. But that doesn't matter because that song was eventually thrown out with all these other really cool songs, and it was shaved down to barely be one studio album in length. There was tons of fucking problems, and this was probably the most drama that had ever happened in the studio of the band.
All the people that were there at the label when we did Images and Words and Awake were now gone, and all these new people that were ready to move on to the next fad, whatever was popular in 97, 96, 97. It was another period in the band that we almost gave in, threw in the towel. And we started to wonder, maybe Pull Me Under was a fluke. Maybe we are a one-hit wonder. Maybe that was our 15 minutes, And we went out and we started playing some local shows just to get out there and play. And we invited some of these new label people out to feel that love. And I think that's when they said, hey, let's get these guys back in the studio and do another one.
Now, Falling Into Infinity, which I think is a really underrated album. A lot of people really hate it because it's kind of more radio friendly due to the studio interference. But I also think it's pretty good, and a lot of people that don't like Dream Theater might enjoy this one because it's a bit more stripped down. But you're probably not going to like the 90s stylings of the album, the more softer songs, more grunge-oriented songs. Now, the album was originally going to be called Stream of Consciousness, which actually becomes the name of an instrumental they do later down the road. But they convinced Mike to change it to Falling Into Infinity, which I think Falling Into Infinity is a way better album title anyways. Now, speaking of Mike, it's very, very, very important to note, especially later on, that Mike was the one that really did not want to strip down, did not want it to go commercial, but it was actually John and the rest of the band that agreed to it. Remember that. And other than throwing out a bunch of songs that they wanted to be on the album to make sure it wasn't a double album, like I said, the studio did interfere a lot during the writing process. Originally, Burning My Soul was supposed to be much longer, and they completely removed the instrumental section and made it its own song called Hell's Kitchen. In fact, Mike actually makes references to a lot of the turmoil going on with the band, the studio, and the music business in general, with the really underrated killer song called Just Let Me Breathe, which actually has a lot of callbacks to other classic rock songs, as well as references to Kurt No Brain blowing his brains out. It also makes references to his distaste of MTV, but in the song he refers to it as MTV, you know, like not MT, like MC, like this. See, this is empty, MTV. You get it? Do you get it? Now the label ordered famed pop songwriter known as Desmond Child to come in and help the band, which I know of from Kiss, but of course all you other fucking snobs out there are gonna be like, well, he did all these other things. I don't care. Anyway, so Desmond Child came in to help rewrite some of the songs. Most notably, he took a song called You or Me and turned it into You Not Me and completely rewrote the song and changed it or whatever. Honestly, a lot of people complain how the original is way better. I actually kind of like the Desmond Child version a lot more of You Not Me. But to be honest, what really pisses me off, makes no fucking sense, is why this wasn't made the fucking music video, okay? What was the point of bringing in Desmond Child if you're just gonna make Hollow Years, the boring fucking song, the stupid music video? Oh, we're driving around in a car, that's so exciting, there's people handing things to each other in a fucking alleyway. That was stupid as fuck. You Not Me was at least catchy. It was at least kind of 90s, so like people would have maybe liked it if it was put on the radio, if it had a fucking music video that wasn't NyQuil. Now you do have prog epics on here despite the fact that they cut off a shitload of them for the final product, but you do have a really big fan favorite, Trial of Tears, which is a good song, but I think that the other epic on here is much fucking better. Heavy, killer, really catchy, arguably, in fact no, the best fucking song on the album, Fight Me. I think that Lines in the Sand is by far the standout. In fact, Derek Sherinian actually was very instrumental, no pun intended, to the creation of this song.
It was the first thing that I started playing in rehearsals, and Portnoy heard it right away and thought it was great. He goes, what is that, what is that? And we started working it out, and it all started off with this riff.
The band was kind of going down the tubes. Critically, they were flopping. Sales, the tours was not going as well. It's just, they were going down the tubes, basically. So Mike actually threatened to leave the band. The band convinced him to stay, but on one condition, that he could shake the tree and pretty much be the leader of the band, which he became the leader of the band, and I think did a pretty good job of it, but we'll get to more of that later. But he did shake the tree, and down came Derek Sherinian. Now, they fired him over conference call, which was kind of shitty, but they really, really wanted Jordan Rudess in the band.
We first met Jordan after Kevin left the band, and we were auditioning keyboard players, and we auditioned Jordan, and he blew us away.
It wasn't a good time to join Dream Theater at that point, but we remained in touch.
He toured with us. Him and Rod Morgenstein opened for us at one point on tour.
Me and John Petrucci ended up doing a side project called the Liquid Tension Experiment. So I invited Jordan to be a part of this project, and then the great Tony Levin on bass.
You know, if we approached you, you know, what would you say, you know, about joining the group again? And I was like, well, you know what? At this point, it could work.
And now here he is, an official new member of Dream Theater, Mr. Jordan Rudess.
Now, a lot of people either love Jordan and think he's like the best keyboard player ever. I think he's definitely, arguably, objectively one of the best. But a lot of people hate him because they think he's too wanky. He doesn't add anything. Now look, I understand Kevin Moore had better tone and all that stuff, maybe even had better soul. But just to throw out Jordan because sometimes he gets wanky due to fucking John's request and Mike's request, not necessarily his own. I mean, come on. He writes so many creative things to begin with. I mean, look at 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. That was pretty much his baby. So get the fuck out of here with that shit. Jordan is a great, important player in the band. And this, to me, is the classic lineup objectively. I mean, sales went through the roof, critical acclaim went through the roof with this lineup, and it just kind of went further down the tubes with the Kevin Moore lineup. That's not to say Jordan's way better or anything like that, or a better songwriter. I'm just stating facts here. This is pretty much the golden years of the band. And then once again, thanks to Mike, not anyone else, he shook the tree again and demanded from now on that no studio interference with the band will ever happen, that the band will produce their own albums, and that we'll have other people mix it, but they are in control of their own product. The label agreed, and they went back to Bear Track Studios, which is the place that they actually recorded Images and Words at. And then they took that epic song that was left off, Metropolis Part 2, and they decided, let's split this off into more songs, add more things to it. And from there, they decided to make a full, balls-to-the-wall concept album that turned out to be a landmark in progressive metal.
We went in and began this next chapter in Dream Theater history, free of the powers that be and just completely independent, with a whole new gusto for making the best album we possibly can and proving everybody wrong.
We really needed that acceptance from the fans, and we really needed to do a record like that at Like Scenes. Concept record, self-produced. It was a very, very big point in our career. It's probably in the same way that Images and Words was a very big step. I think Scenes from Memory was also.
Now this album definitely saved the band for sure. There was a lot more morale, there was a lot more creativity, they were inspired beyond hell. I mean, just watch the behind the scenes of making this album, they're all happy. Even fucking John Mayung, who has no expressions. But a big misconception is that this album was a big commercial hit. It didn't sell that well, but it was very big critically. A lot of the critics praised it, the fans were beyond happy, and fans did come back. This was the turning point album, and that's why I think it's the golden years here. But once again, this is my episode, this is my opinion, and humans are different. You can't fucking take that. Then once again, get the fuck out, you child. Honestly, this album I really did not like for a long time. Obviously at first I really liked it, but then for a long time I thought it was beyond overrated. My reasons for it is I did not like the concept. I still kind of don't, I'll get into that. And I still kind of think that a lot of the songs don't stand up on their own weight. Obviously you have heavy hitters like Strange Deja Vu and Home and whatnot, but there's some songs on here that just don't go well by themselves, and you kind of have to listen to it in the full album context. So once I put it under heavy scrutiny, you just kind of go like, I'd rather listen to these tracks versus the other half of the album. You understand what I'm saying? That being said though, still, if you listen to the album in one go, it's still a really good experience all the way through. So I think no matter what, it's still a pretty good album. It's just, I don't think the songs are as strong as some people act like they are. And I actually think that the album isn't as strong as some people think it is, because they think, oh my god, it's an amazing concept album, therefore it's the greatest fucking thing ever. But in all fairness, I think the songwriting's not nearly as strong as some of the earlier works and some of the stuff after. But let's look at it this way, okay? Metropolis Part 2 is a movie, not an album. Make it as a movie because it's a concept. You gotta look at it as the story, right? Look at it as a script. Well, the story goes something like this. This guy named Nicholas is put under by some fucking hypnagogic therapist, or whatever the fuck it's called. And he actually is sent back in time. And he learns that a girl named Victoria was murdered, and he's investigating her death, almost like a noir story, right? Now, already there's a huge problem. The fact that the story doesn't have that much going on. I'm going to kind of finish it off in a bit. There's not that much going on. I mean, he learns who murdered her. It was like her ex-boyfriend or something like that, because she was sleeping around. So he murdered the two of them, right? And then he goes back. So there's not that much going on here story-wise. The problem is that they fucking stretch it out for how many goddamn songs, and you just hear over and over and over, Victoria's dead, Victoria's dead, Victoria's dead. We get it. Tell fucking more of a story. Jesus Christ, you can't make 70 minutes of a story of something that you could probably just have condensed in that 20-minute original song. It just feels stretched out beyond belief. It honestly felt like they maybe wrote lyrics and story before the fucking songs, which is never a good thing. I could see why a lot of the stronger songs were songs that were originally written for that 20-minute song. But then you have the fucking ending, okay? So Nick comes out, his hypnagogic whatever the fuck And then he goes back home and realizes, you know what? I'm happy. I'm gonna turn my life around. I'm gonna get back with my girl or whatever. And I don't know. It's not that interesting because none of this was ever discussed earlier, so whatever. But then the ending makes no goddamn sense because it, you know, goes over all the death of Victoria and whatnot in the past. It's like, whatever, get on with it. And then the ending is Nick sleeping. And then the hypnagogic therapist guy walks into his house with a gun, says, "Open your eyes, Nicholas," and shoots him. Now, some people think this is cool because, oh my god, what a twist, right? But if you look at it in the lens of a movie, this doesn't make any fucking sense because if he was just gonna kill him, because another twist, he was actually the reincarnation of the murderer in the past, and Nick is a reincarnation of Victoria. If that were to make any sense, right, and that he was meant to kill Nick, just like the one guy killed Victoria, then why the fuck did he not just kill him when he put him under at the beginning of the goddamn story? It doesn't make any fucking sense. But anyways, back to the music and not the stupid story. Hopefully, I've opened your eyes, Nicholas. The story's not that fucking good. It's kind of stupid. Now, even though I do like it, and it's considered one of the best albums from them, I do have to give you a warning to new fans, though, is that I would not recommend this as a starter album at all. It's kind of wanky, and a lot of people that do not like that side of Dream Theater will absolutely hate this album. In fact, this album actually contains their probably most wanky song of all time, their instrumental, The Dance of Eternity, which has like hundreds of fucking time changes. Well, like I said, I love the strong moments, Strange Deja Vu. I fucking love Home, even though Home kind of sounds a lot like 46 and 2 by Tool. And then some of my more favorite moments are the more soft, stripped down moments, like One Last Time. And The Spirit Carries On, which is a really good song that's clearly inspired by Pink Floyd. It has like a great epic chorus at the end and whatnot. It's a good song and all, but my problem is, what the fuck does this have anything to do with the story? This is when you really realize how much the story is dragging, and they finally get to all the history of Victoria died, and you're told that fucking 30 times. And then you get here where it's all of a sudden, why are we here? Where did I come from? I believe in God. It's like, what does that have to do fucking anything with the story?
Spirit Carries On, I think, is one of Dream Theater's anthems. It's one of those songs that never fails to get the audience on their feet.
Now, what else is cool is that they did a lengthy tour for the album, and they did a really cool live video with tons of effects, cool actors. They even have orchestration and choirs. Known as Scenes from New York, where they play the whole album and they do almost like a musical, almost opera version of it. What's really controversial, though, is that the original cover for the album featured a burning New York skyline, and as you can see, the Twin Towers. What made it more controversial is the fucking release date. This album was released on September 11th, 2001. So they immediately pulled it from store shelves and did a completely different cover and all. But that's pretty fucking creepy. You know, some people say it's really weird that Slayer released God Hates Us All on that day, but it's even fucking weirder. You put the New York skyline with the World Trade Center on fire on 9/11. I guess Dream Theater did 9/11. Anyways, even though it's not one of my favorites, it's still a classic album. This is truly the beginning of the golden era. And they would just continue on pumping out amazing fucking albums. In fact, the next one is even more ambitious than this one.
We're on the last two lines of this fucking song, and we're gonna get it.
Should it go up high like that, or should it be like when you go, I'm not? It's like too strainy. It's like fucking straining macaroni.
Okay, so I'll sing it clean for you. I think that singing it clean. Okay, whatever. I'm not gonna say a fucking thing.
Hey James, I don't want to tell you now, but you're singing the wrong words.
I fucking love this album. 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence is actually what got me into the band. You know, I'd heard Images and Words, I liked it. Heard Awake, I liked it. Then my friend recommended me 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. He said it's the best album. I'm like, I never hear anyone actually talk about the later stuff that much. It's on 90 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck? I see the album cover looks horrible. Looks like 9 Inch Nails or something. Then I actually listened to it. This album is, in my opinion, much fucking stronger than Metropolis Part 2. A lot of people will like burn my house down for that and whatnot, but sorry, it's just how I feel, and that's actually how a lot of people feel. But anyways, to me, it's very diverse. It's a lot more creative. It feels probably just as creative as like Images and Words and Awake. To all you people that I keep recommending for like starter albums, Images and Words, maybe even Awake, I would even say try this one as well. Even though it's 90 minutes, I'm telling you, it's a good one. And the reason it's so fucking long is that it's only 6 songs, but the second half of the album, which is pretty much one song broken up into multiple parts, is like a huge song. It's like a conceptual whole side of an album. Now the first song on the first half of the album is called The Glass Prison, which is a really long, epic song that immediately really got me into the band. It's got great riffs, great vocals, everything is really fucking exciting about the song. And this is the beginning of Mike Portnoy's 12-Step Suite, a multiple song thing across many albums that talks about his dealing with alcoholism.
I indulged way too much. I've always been an obsessive compulsive person, could never do anything in moderation, so of course that applied to my drinking and drugging. But you know, I learned you know, through time how to overcome that.
Another really interesting thing about the song though is that it starts where Finally Free, the last song on Metropolis Part 2 ended. It ended with the gunshot going to Static. This album starts at Static and goes to Glass Prison. This whole next run of albums would basically do that, where the beginning of each album would be the end of the last album. So you can kind of just bleed them all together, which is pretty cool. I mean, I might as well just track by track. It's only 6 songs, it's one of my favorite albums. Blind Faith's a great song, lyrics by James LaBrie. Got a really cool unison in it, really beautiful. A lot of people that don't like the wanky side love this song. You got Misunderstood, a really catchy, melodic song. I feel like it's a little too long though. They just kind of stretched the ending on forever. I wish they had shortened it, maybe even made it a single and music video. But what's interesting about this song is there's a guitar solo in it where John Petrucci took inspiration from George Harrison, where he played a guitar solo forward, then played it backwards, learned how to play it backwards and the feel and everything, recorded that, and then played it reverse of that. So it sounds all wonky and weird. It's pretty cool. And then you have a really good standout on the album, The Great Debate, which is a really lengthy epic song that has tons of audio snippets and whatnot. It's a song about the debate over stem cell research. Now, a lot of people in the song are talking about like why it's bad to kill babies and it's unethical and science and whatnot. It's a really good song that shows both sides of the debate very accurately. I like how they don't really take a stand on it. It's totally ambiguous. You take your own side on this. And you have Disappear, which is a really sad song. They use tons of cool effects to make it actually sound like the instruments are crying. Then you have, of course, the 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, the reason we're all here, right? Arguably their best fucking song, one of the best prog epics of all time. Broken into multiple parts. You have a song that starts it called The Overture, which is an instrumental thing that Jordan wrote that pretty much created the whole rest of the album. He took snippets from each part of the overture and created each song with it. And this overture is very orchestral. You could tell that Jordan put tons of fucking hours into it. Now, when the lyrics come in, it starts with a section called About to Crash, which details the story of a girl that has bipolar disorder, and her family kind of doesn't know what to do, and she's not getting along with people. Really, really great song. Then you have War Inside My Head, when shit gets really heavy. A real dark song about PTSD and the Vietnam War. And that goes into the test that stumped them all, a crazy schizophrenic song about schizophrenia. This is easily the wankiest part of the song, but it kind of makes sense with the subject matter. Even the vocals are fucking crazy. Then you get a double dose of my favorite parts of the song in the middle of it. The softer part, which used to be my least favorite, but now I really like it. It's very emotional, it's dark. A lot of people laugh at it because of the line James says, "I'm just a poor girl." It's a song about a girl with depression. And then as the song goes along, you learn why she had depression. She was supposed to have a baby, but the doctors had killed her baby or something to that effect. It's really dark, and I love how the guitar solo at the end of it really kind of details that. It's at first this melodic, hopeful part, and then right as you hear the audio of the doctors killing the baby, all of a sudden it switches to dark, bluesing evil, and it's a really, really great fucking guitar solo that really shows how good of songwriters they are. This whole fucking song does. And then you have Solitary Shell. Now, Solitary Shell is a song about a person with autism, Asperger's, whatever. You know, in all seriousness, let's be serious for a second here, guys. Turn off the camera. This song really does, this whole section means a lot to me personally because I actually do have an older brother that has autism, and I'm not trying to go for like sympathy points in here or whatnot. You know, he's high functioning and whatnot. He's a really cool guy. Sometimes it's hard for me to understand him. Sometimes it's hard for even the rest of the family, some friends, people in general. It's hard to understand people that are different, especially in their brain and stuff, especially people with autism. They're just a little bit different, right? And this song really does explain perfectly what it's like to have that. You know, you're basically in a solitary shell. You really want them to break out of it, but they can't. They're born in the solitary shell.
Break out of his solitary shell.
Then you have the last part of it, Losing Time, which many think is about dementia, because it's called Losing Time and stuff. But the band actually points to this song being about multiple personality disorder. I don't know what the fuck that has to do with losing time, but whatever. Anyways, it details tons of different psychoses. Is that how you say psychoses? Anyways, this song is truly magnificent, okay? I've shown this to people that don't like Dream Theater, that think they're way too wanky, don't like metal, that don't like prog, everything. This song, this whole epic song, even if it's just parts of it, there's something of this song for everyone. It truly does connect to people of all different ages, of different backgrounds, everything. If you want to get into Dream Theater, if you want to get into this kind of music, you really should not even start with an album. Start with this multiple part song. Now they toured for this album and did a bunch of cover type things, which were weird. They basically did entire shows where they did like Dark Side of the Moon and then recorded that, and they did Number of the Beast and recorded that. They did Master of Puppets and recorded that. It was all terrible. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they didn't just do a live video of this tour of the album. I don't know why they didn't just play the whole suite in its entirety on a live video. That would have been really cool. Now there was actually a rumor circulating, and I still have not gotten confirmation of it, but a lot of people have always talked about how there was a rumor that James LaBrie was threatened by Mike Portnoy, that he was going to fire him from the band if he did not lose weight, if he did not get his singing act in order, because he was kind of singing like pure shit around this time and kind of not giving it his all, which is kind of a believable theory because he did all of a sudden lose a lot of weight for the next album and was singing a lot better and putting a lot more effort into it. Now the next album took a big musical risk, changed the formula up once again, this time for a much darker sound.
There are certain songs that we would play every night that always had this impact with the audience. Like, they would just be lifted by these certain songs, you know? The energy level would be so great. You know, I said, wouldn't it be great to write a whole record with songs like that?
Like, I want to hear music that has balls and chunk. I love progressive music. I love listening to Yes and Pink Floyd and Genesis, but at the end of the day, I want to just crank up something loud and fucking headbang.
Honestly, dudes, I love and hate this album, kind of. It used to be my all-time favorite Dream Theater album. For a while, it was kind of one of my least favorite. Now I like it again, but I have to admit that it does have some problems, despite it being one of the albums in the classic era. It's probably the weakest in that era. I like Metropolis Part 2 more. The main reason for that is I used to love it because it was heavy, but just because it's heavy doesn't mean it's great. Problem is that it incorporates a lot of groove metal and nu metal elements. There's songs like Honor Thy Father where there's literal fucking rapping going on. There's jump the fuck up riffs, bonga 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 shit going on. And then you even have like some Korn and Slipknot style vocalizations on shit like this Dying Soul. It's got some memories and attachments with me, but I gotta admit that if I had tried to get in this album like first listen nowadays, I'd probably fucking hate it. The song As I Am is pretty good. It's considered a classic, but it's very groove metal, very like Pantera inspired. Some people say it sounds like Metallica. I don't fucking hear that at all. This one's inspired by John Petrucci having a problem with the guitar player of Queensryche at the time, Mike Stone. When they were on tour, Mike kept constantly bugging Petrucci about, here's a better way of playing the guitar and shit. And Mike Stone's a shitty guitar player, so John Petrucci was kind of pissed about that and wrote the lyrics to this. And you also have this Dying Soul, which we talked about, which is the second part in this 12-step suite, Mike Portnoy alcoholism thing. This one is one of my least favorite parts. Actually, it's probably my least favorite part of the whole thing. It's still pretty good though. Then we have Honor Thy Father, which I mentioned, the fucking rapping gay song. But you know what, honestly, the middle section of the song is pretty cool. The lyrics, they're very nu metal, like, oh, I hate my dad and he raped me type shit. You know, you'd hear them like a Korn song. But it's about Mike Portnoy's stepdad and how much he hated him and whatnot. Then you have Instrumental Stream of Consciousness, which is pretty wanky. This whole album's actually very wanky, so those that don't like that Dream Theater, stay clear away from this shit. But I will say what's really cool is that the instrumental actually starts with a separate song. It kind of bleeds into it called Vacant, which is very sad, very melodic. And this is a song that's lyrics written by James LaBrie, and it's about his daughter that was in a coma at the time, and they weren't sure if she was going to wake up. So very, very good song. I actually like it more than Stream of Consciousness. Then you have the song The Name of God, which is probably my favorite song on the album, the ending epic. But you can tell this song is very clearly lyrically inspired by the events of 9/11. My favorite part is the kind of wanky unison section towards the end of the song. A lot of people will hate that because it's just type shit. But you know, honestly, this is probably the craziest fucking unison they've ever done.
We're all on steroids.
What kind of steroids?
No. Finger steroids.
Take us to Flavortown, Guy Fieri.
This album definitely not only alienates me, but it alienated all the fans. A lot of people either say it's the best album or the fucking worst album. Then you have another album in the classic era. Many argue the end of the classic era. That is much more of a return to like prog rock elements, as well as some metal stuff.
We decided when it came to Octavarium that it was time again to kind of get back to our roots, if you will, and get back to the stylistic things that each guy in the band could bring to the table, and really go for a Dream Theater album that was a little bit more open to that.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to say, what is Dream Theater about? Play this CD, and you'll get it.
Everything is centered around 8. It's called Octavarium. It's our 8th studio album. There are 8 songs. There are 8 keys that create an octave.
Now I can understand why the last album was very polarizing, but this one I don't get why. A lot of fans really don't like this one as well. In fact, a lot of fans hate the title track, which is fucking blasphemy. Blasphemy. They should be burned at the stake. This one, like I said, much more prog, much softer, a lot less heavy compared to Train of Thought. And you can tell that most of this album was written with acoustic guitars and piano. But I could see where maybe some people wouldn't like some of the songs in here because their influences really start to show in here, especially Mike's influences. The song I Walk Beside You, which is clearly inspired by U2. And then you have kind of an angrier song called Never Enough, which is very much inspired by Muse. There's a couple other Dream Theater songs that sound like Muse. And this one is about Mike Portnoy's anger and frustration with the fans because it's just never enough. They're always mad about something. The album opens really well with a heavy killer epic, The Root of All Evil. There's another part of the 12-step suite. The title actually makes a reference towards the whole Octavarium theme of the album, where it's all different octaves on each song. And this one is referring to like the root note or whatever, the root of an octave, whatever. I'm not a fucking musical genius. I don't study stuff in a conservatory. And you have another heavy killer song, Panic Attack, which was actually the very first song I ever heard from the band. Always loved the song. It always drew me back to this album, even when I was kind of on and off with this one. So you have two epics towards the end. You have Sacrificed Sons, one of the best and most emotional songs they've ever done. It took them years and years and years to fully articulate a good song lyrically about the 9/11 terror attacks, right? You know, they made references a little bit with, you know, In the Name of God on the last album, but this one is truly a Dream Theater take on the whole thing, and they cover all types of angles and everything. But what's weird is that James LaBrie is the one that wrote the lyrics, which doesn't make any fucking sense because he's Canadian. I mean, I understand, you know, he was maybe in America at the time or whatever, but I'm saying it's kind of weird to think the American-born members of the band, especially the New York natives of the band, would have been more inclined to write the lyrics. Now, although most of the album is more shorter songs, it does end with these two epics, Sacrifice Sons and the fucking epic to end all epics. The title track, the greatest prog suite of all fucking time, greatest song ever made. Honestly, all fucking around aside, you know, you guys know me, right? I always make jokes like, this is my favorite band, this is my favorite band, this is my favorite album, I just fuck around with you guys. But when people ask me what is the greatest song of all time, I always point to this song. There's not much to be said musically about it because it's just an experience. It's a building experience. Each part transitions to the next perfectly, and it just really builds up and lets you go. It is actually, I'm gonna sound pretentious as fuck, but it's really a journey of a song. The beginning of it's very inspired by the Pink Floyd epic classic Shine On You Crazy Diamond with the synthesizer buildup. But then it just keeps going. It's great sections, beautiful melodic, great songwriting, great singing, by the way. But then it starts to get crazy once it gets more heavy and chaotic. There's tons of references in the middle of the song to other classic rock songs like Supper's Ready and whatnot. All these other prog songs, classic rock. There's tons of stuff. I know there's YouTube videos that have cataloged all the references and whatnot, but I don't have time for that shit. My favorite part is pretty much the whole second half of the song. John Petrucci's amazing melodic guitar solo that ends it. One of his most passionate solos ever. But I always love like the heavy build up to the end where it gets dark and brooding, then James kind of sounds like Dave Mustaine. That's the best part of the song for me. Now this album is kind of the end of the golden era for most people. It's kind of the end of an era for the band. They did an awesome live DVD and album called Score. They got a whole orchestra to come in, and they did an amazing version of 6 Degrees, finally, that gets a full treatment. And they even did a really good documentary on it as well, called The Score So Far, which you guys should watch. Then the band signed a new record deal with Roadrunner after taking a really short break, and now they're going to make 2 more albums with this lineup. So it's still kind of the golden era, but these next 2 albums are kind of polarizing more so than the last couple for the fans.
It's always been about controlled chaos, kind of like meticulous but abstract at the same time, you know. So it seemed like a fitting name for the album, as you know, it's a fitting description of the band in general.
Incoming! 4!
As much as I feel Metropolis is kind of overrated, I've always felt Systematic Chaos was pretty fucking underrated. Honestly, a lot of people, especially critics, really rag on this one, and I kind of get it, because of all their albums, this is by far the most wanky technical one. But it's just, I enjoy every song on it. I really do. I fucking love the songs, and they've grown on me even more over time. Like I said, do not check this one out first. This one's really, really, really wanky. Most people don't like it. I really do like it for some reason. I can't even explain it. There are some little problems with it, like Mike Portnoy and John Petrucci were doing a lot more gang vocals on this in the next album. A lot of people don't like that. There's some really cool songs in here. Constant Motion, which is a really cool riffy song. I used to not like it because of Mike's vocals on it, but it is a really good song. I had a music video, which they haven't done since fucking stupid Hollow years. That's really nice. It gets them more attention again. And this song's about Mike Portnoy constantly doing several different projects because he's fucking crazy. Now my favorite song in here has got to be one that used to be my all-time least favorite song here. It's their heaviest song they ever made, probably their darkest song, and what really caught my attention was the crazy instrumental middle section. It is really creative and all over the place. The Dark Eternal Night.
The Dark Eternal Night is it's really a song about a monster.
To all you gay sayers out there that say this album is very wanky in all places, there's still some moments where they strip it down. Forsaken's really good, but then really the stripped down song here is Repentance. Kind of a longer song that's really mellow the whole time. A lot of build-ups, a lot of choruses, a lot of choirs. And what's really unique about this one, which is another part of the 12-step suite, the real soft part of it, is that Mike Portnoy got a bunch of really famous metal rock musicians who do little spoken word bits throughout the song of them talking about things that they regretted in their lives, which is really cool. My favorite part is at the very end when Dave Ellefson says,
"You're only the sick in your secrets, but the truth shall save us."
Well, what's really special about this album is the opening and ending tracks. Just like Shine On You Crazy Diamond from Pink Floyd, where they had the song split up in two halves, this huge epic. Begin the album and end the album with it. They did this within the presence of enemies. A really dark and probably the most underrated suite that they've ever done, because not that many people talk about this one. But this one is really fucking good, just like every suite they've ever done.
Don't bother trying to find them. They will be coming to you. Fight and destroy until you can't take anymore.
Although this one and the next one are looked down upon a lot by Dream Theater fans, especially the ones that are happy that Mike Portnoy left the band, I feel that this one and the next one are actually some of my all-time favorites, especially the next one.
Once me and John started getting the lyrics together, we started to see a common thread in what we were writing about, which were these dark, heavy situations, you know, dealing with death and recovery from addiction and, you know, near fatal accidents and all these kind of negative, dark situations. And that's kind of where I thought of the album title, you know, because there's an expression, every cloud has a silver lining, meaning any bad situation you're in, you know, something positive can come out of it. And the lyrics that John and I were writing kind of had that common thread. These were dark subjects, but in each case they were kind of optimistic and hopeful.
Surprisingly, I didn't really like this one that much at first. In fact, it actually took me a while for even Count of Tuscany, the fan favorite song on the album, to kick in, but boy did this album ever kick in. Of all their albums, this one has probably grown the most with each listen. I feel might be their best one overall, but I can't pick a favorite. I'll be honest with you guys. There's too many really fucking good albums from them, but this one is a really, really great, consistent one. The songs are strong. It's a bit more stripped down. I would say this is another one I'd recommend start with this one. It's a fucking good one. Got a great opening epic, A Nightmare to Remember, which talks about John Petrucci being in a car accident. Has a great melodic middle section, has some weird Mike Portnoy vocals, and even has a blast beat in there. You have a cool single, Rite of Passage, also Wither was a music video as well. But what's weird about Rite of Passage is this song's actually about the Illuminati. But to me, the second side is the best, with 3 amazing epics, one after the other. The ending of the 12-step suite, you have, of course, the Shattered Fortress, arguably the best part of it all. I know a lot of people say this is the worst part. I don't know why. All the new sections are amazing, and all the reprises from past sections feel very perfectly interwoven. I love how it ends with the beginning of the glass prison. Fucking awesome.
You're smart enough for me to trust. Go live your life now. Just keep these steps in your life.
Of course, you have the fan favorite Count of Tuscany. I think it's kind of overrated compared to some of these other epics though, but to me, the standout song is the most emotional one on here. Kind of a Rush-inspired song, especially in the first half. But to me, it stands out all on its own in the second half. You have a song that is a big tribute to the person that even thought of the band name. Mike Portnoy's dad was dying at the time from cancer, and Mike wrote the song as a dedication to him lyrically. In fact, he even sung it to him before he died. You'd believe, honestly, with John Petrucci's amazing guitar solo at the end, which is one of his most emotional ever, that you'd think that it was his dad that had just died. And they did some promotional things and toured for the album, but they didn't really do any live DVDs or anything like that, which was kind of weird. It felt like the band was slowing down. And just like Shattered Fortress and Best of Times kind of doing a tribute to Mike's dad, this was kind of the end of an era. Now that we've reached this point in the band, the most controversial time in the band's history, we have a lot to talk about before we get on to another album. So if you're already a Dream Theater fan, I know a lot of you are already sick of the whole thing with the Mike versus Mike thing. We're going to get into all of that as well as what happened to Mike, but if you really adamantly do not want to hear any of that, there is already timestamps to jump to just jump to dramatic turn of events. But I do urge you to stay because I have some profound things to say.
I guess when you've been doing it this long, it can become kind of stale at times.
Mike said, hey, before you guys get into this, I got some things I have to say. So he basically told us that he wanted Dream Theater to go like on a hiatus and come back 5 years later and have a glorious reunion. And I think it was about then that our jaws kind of hit the floor.
I defend his right to take a break and whatnot, and I could see where he thinks the band should definitely kind of reconvene and maybe start fresh again. And in that sense, he's right. But I could see where the other guys are coming from, where they were pissed about it. And they're like, hey, that's like if your boss just kind of laid you off and said, yeah, we'll add you back when we need you. Instead, it's like, let's find a new fucking job, or let's get a new manager. So Mike kind of fucked off and said he wanted to take a break, and I think, honestly, that the rest of the members would have kind of agreed to this and had taken a break if it wasn't for the fact that Mike had then immediately begun on other projects and had quickly joined Avenged Sevenfold, or as I like to call them, Avenged Pigeonhole. But once again, I could kind of also see where Mike was coming from because he wanted to take a break, but then the drummer of Avenged Sevenfold, the Rev, had died, and the band really needed a drummer at the time, so they thought, let's get the Rev's biggest inspiration, Mike Portnoy, to drum for them. But there's kind of no way he could say no. I mean, Jordan Rudess had apparently originally cried when Mike left, but there were some other members in the band that seemed like they were a little bit more happy when Mike the Bluebeard Pirate had left. People like James Labrie that has since said that there's no way Mike Portnoy will ever come back, and he hasn't really talked to him since, and it really seemed like there was a big rift between them. And some have hinted that there was even a rift formed between John Mayung and Mike Portnoy, where I could see where John Mayung is coming from because Mike is such an overbearing presence. He's so loud, he's so the face of the band, you know, and John Mayung's just such the opposite. He's such a quiet guy. And with Mike gone, the rest of the band is pretty much just quiet guys.
The four of us give each other high fives. I say the four of us because John Mayung is always on the stage. Basically, after sound check, John Mayung will go eat dinner and then just go into his own little world on stage, right? And he just stays there until showtime. So we just see him on the stage. But the rest of the four of us are all backstage giving each other high fives and have a good show kind of thing.
And since Mike Portnoy had become the leader of the band, you could argue that a lot of the other voices were completely silenced.
You know, I will call most of the shots without having to discuss it. I will, you know, I will design a T-shirt or the album cover or make a set list without having to discuss it.
But we don't know, especially with someone like John Mayung, it's really hard to guess how he feels and how he felt because he doesn't express that much. But you could tell that he was definitely involved more and talks a lot more in interviews and whatnot since Mike Portnoy's departure. Now, all Dream Theater members including past and present, have made amends with Mike Portnoy in recent times, except for James LaBrie, who I think just really hates him for some reason. I'll get to in a bit why I think that. And then, of course, John Mayung, but John Mayung is such a reserved guy anyways, and Jordan Rudess has hinted that maybe it's just the fact that not necessarily does John Mayung dislike him, but it's hard for him to reach out to people. And also, obviously, Kevin Moore will never repair his friendship with any of the fucking members. But he's even, since gone back and become friends again with people like Derek Shirini, John Petrucci, and even recently Jordan Rudess. They've even done performances together. So this caused a big rift in the band, and the rest of the members decided we need a new drummer. They made a weird documentary called The Spirit Carries On, where they auditioned a bunch of drummers. But I always felt that this documentary was stupid because they kind of knew who they wanted from the beginning. They knew they wanted Mike Mangini. And honestly, I'm going to defend him in a bit, but I really think they should have gone with a wild card, Marco Miniman, because not only is he a great player, a great guy to get along with, and he has tons of different experiences, different bands and projects, and could pretty much do anything, but he's a really fucking monstrous songwriter. Dream Theater wanted a cool musical different approach. They really should have let him into the fold and let him become a strong songwriter. But it seemed more like they were trying to get someone that they felt that they could get along with. Although I must admit, until recently I was always very critical of Mike Mangini. I do think he is a very, very good drummer, and I'll get to why I still have problems with him, but I mean, look at stuff like this. Not even Mike Portnoy could do shit like that, so he's obviously technically more advanced. Then all of a sudden Mike Portnoy goes, hey, can I join the band again? And they said no, which that was a really shitty thing of him to do, let's be honest. That brings us into the debate. Mike versus Mike. Who better? Now technicality, this isn't even debatable. Even people that stick with Mike Portnoy will say that Mike Mangini is technically more advanced. And there's just no debating that. That clip I showed you, Mike Portnoy can't even do that shit. In fact, his drum solos are kind of a one-trick pony thing. And then there's tone. Obviously, even people that defend Mike Mangini will say that Mike Portnoy had the better tone. Even when he was incorporating drum triggers, he definitely sounded better, he was mixed better. Mike Mangini's mix is way too loud and way too processed and sounds like absolute shit on almost all albums he's on. Now, what I've always felt was more important though than technicality is stuff like songwriting and groove, especially groove. And Mike Portnoy, I've always felt, and this is very personal, I always felt he had the better groove. And I compare the old songs. So Mike Mangini's versions of the old songs they do live and Mike Portnoy's versions of the old songs. Mike had always, even in his later days, always had a really great sense of groove. Whereas Mike Mangini, it just seemed like it was forced, it was weird, I don't know. It's personal preference, of course, but I know a lot of people have seen what I'm talking about. But something that I cannot deny is the whole relationship aspect of the band. Obviously, they wanted more of a yes man. They wanted someone that could get along with easier. Because, to be honest with ourselves, Mike Portnoy is kind of a fucking dick. I love him, and I think that's kind of part of his personality. But I can understand why a lot of these weird, quiet people in the band, these fucking nerds, would not get along with this outspoken, kind of obnoxious guy. Ever since Mike Portnoy left the band and all of his projects and stuff, he's been kind of a dick and kind of shoving his foot in his mouth. He's been constantly on blabbermouth, and honestly for kind of a good reason, because he's been doing several shitty things like running his mouth about how some fan came up to him and wanted him to sign things that he was not featured on in Dream Theater, aka some of the Mike Mangini era, and he like flipped out about it on social media, which was stupid to do. I mean, let's be honest, Mike, a lot of people out there are clueless idiots. The guy probably thought you were still in the band and it wasn't to be offensive towards you. And then there's even instances where he has like gone off the rails in live performances. Allegedly there was a time where he completely ripped his drum set apart because he didn't like how it was set up in front of everyone. They kind of yelled at his roadie about it. And videos like this have been suspiciously scrubbed off of YouTube, but those articles about it may or may not be fake news, so we don't know. But I kind of believe that they might be real, and this is coming from someone that... You are fake news. ...usually sides more with Mike Portnoy. Now with involvement, ever since his indoctrination in the band, Mike Mangini has hardly been there and done anything other than just recording drums, hasn't really done any of the writing. But you could argue that Mike Portnoy was a little too overbearing. He edited all the DVDs, he handled all the fan stuff. You could argue he did too much. But at the same time, Mike Portnoy was the really fun part of the band. He was the funny face of the band. He was doing a lot of the interviews. And since he's gone, you know, let's be honest, the band's kind of boring personality-wise.
But at the same time, I have to point out the fact that although he may have been a little too involved, Mike Portnoy is the reason Dream Theater got to where they were.
You know, you hear the stories about how Lars Ulrich kind of got Metallica started, and it was very similar to the way that I got Dream Theater started, was just making connections, sending tapes to everyone.
And not only that, remember, Mike Portnoy was the one that caused the band to get back on track, created the golden years of the band, and he made sure the band was a massive force in progressive metal and not just Pull Me Under and then forgotten.
I did not want to compromise. I wanted to stick to our guns and continue with the 12-minute songs. Some of the other guys were feeling the frustration and the temptation from the industry to maybe try things their way. And I had had enough. I said, fuck this. This is no longer about the music. This is about the business and the industry, and this isn't fun anymore. I told them my frustrations and I'd had enough, and basically laid down the law. Said, if this band is gonna stay together, the label has to stay the fuck out of our music. We don't want to work with outside producers anymore, no outside writers. The label will hear the album when it's finished. We're not going to them for permission on what is a hit single. They gotta, if this band's gonna stay together, if this band is gonna survive, everybody get out of our way, book the studio time, and let us make our fucking record.
I can understand relationships in the band, him being a dick, being overbearing, being not as technical, but let's be fucking honest with ourselves. The thing that matters the most is songwriting. This is not even a debate. Mike Portnoy was an actual songwriting force in the band. If you watch any of the documentaries, this is absolutely objective. John would come up with ideas, Mike would make them better like a really good producer and help him arrange the songs. All their progressive great epics have Mike Portnoy's stamp on them. Some of their most important songs like The Glass Prison, Change of Seasons are lyrically and musically heavily influenced by Mike Portnoy. And this is not even a debate. The songwriting is the most important part of the band. Like I said, if they brought in Marco Miniman, maybe this would be a completely different argument, but Mike Portnoy, as it stands, should be in the band. Just work out the differences you have. I get it, he's a dick, but under bad circumstances, bands will still make good music if all the players in the band are great songwriters. And let's be honest, Mike Mangini is not really a songwriter. Now, another thing we have to quickly talk about is since this, James has pretty much lost his voice completely. It's gotten really bad ever since like the Black Clouds and Silver Linings tour. You could argue that maybe this is another reason Mike wanted to slow down, and this could explain why James LaBrie has since still been having a falling out with Mike Portnoy. They've never reconvened. You could tell that James has a chip on his shoulder when it comes to Mike Portnoy, and maybe even for a while that's been brewing, but you can tell that there's something that happened that broke the camel's back when he left. Maybe he straight up told him, your voice has gone to shit, you gotta clear it up, maybe we'll even fire you. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to what's important for the band, Mike at the end of the day was kind of right. And honestly, James LaBrie is the kind of voice that would maybe repair a little bit more over time if it's given a break, and Dream Theater's just overworking him. But whether you like it or not, from this point on until maybe even a change in the future, it's the Mike Mangini era of the band. So let's get on to the albums and stop with the bitching.
This isn't what we wanted. We never expected this, and now here we are. And you know, change happens. It might not be what we want or expect.
But I think all of us really felt strongly about, we got to continue doing what we love and working together. There was no like stopping us.
Now Now the title of Dramatic Turn of Events is a reference towards the conflicts going on in the Middle East, but I've always still thought that the title had a little bit to do with the whole Mike Portnoy leaving thing. I'll be honest, this album made me and every other fan that doubted that they could follow up the departure of Mike Portnoy eat our words. Some people still refuse to listen to it and hate it, but I'll be fucking honest. Good music is good music. Politics shouldn't, define everything. This is a good fucking album. Obviously, I don't like it as much as the last slew of albums, but it still, I think, stands up along with them. If Mike Portnoy was on here, I'd be like, hey, it's another good fucking album just as good as the last bunch, but there's a couple things about him not being in it that kind of cause slight problems with the album. Although this album is still very Dream Theater, you could argue that it's a little too Dream Theater. In fact, many have gone to say that this album is pretty much just Images and Words Part 2. In fact, Mike Portnoy even called the album Desperate because of that. On the Backs of Angels is basically just another Pull Me Under. In the way that each movement happens, it just feels like it's very much mimicking how that song flowed. And then Breaking All Illusions, once again, very much feels like it's mimicking Learning to Live. But to be fair, these songs do add enough new elements. They're still really, really good songs on their own, especially Breaking All Illusions. What's really weird about this material, though, is that after they had hired Mangini to be part of the band, they wrote all of it without him and then tracked all the drums on like a drum machine. And then they had Mike come and see what he could do with it. That's really weird to me. They tried to say something effective. We wanted to see how the rest of us could still write music without anyone else. But it's like, he's a new member of the band. Let him write shit, you fucking weirdos. To be honest, the drumming is really good, but you would never have noticed that Mike Portnoy wasn't there unless I had told you. There's still enough drumming shit going on. You would have expected that was Mike Portnoy. It's just the drums kind of sound weird, and especially the vocals. They were both kind of buried in the mix. But I suppose it's a pretty good thing considering James's voice was really starting to go away at this time. There are a lot of great epic songs in here, some boring ballads for the most part, but my favorite song of those awesome epic songs would of course be Lost Not Forgotten.
I am not immortal. I am just a man.
Now the album was pretty damn good, but this is kind of retreading old ground. They really need to prove themselves at the next one. Sorry guys, but this is one of my absolute least favorite Dream Theater albums. Arguably even their worst. It's not that I hate it, it's not that I don't think it's good, it's just most of it in the middle is just kind of, I can do without it. I never really ever listened to it that much. It's all just kind of plain. The music's plain, the title's plain, the album cover's even fucking plain. Experimental in places like it should have been, but even those moments kind of feel half-baked. And a lot of it feels like unfinished B-sides from the last album, songs that weren't good enough to be on Dramatic Turn of Events. In fact, some of the songs that are trying to experiment don't even really sound like Dream Theater, which would be a good thing, except they sound like Rush. So that's not that fucking good if you're just gonna rip someone off. This time they brought the drums and vocals really high up in the mix, and the vocals are kinda, and the effects they put on them are not that great either. What really bugs me is the weird, muddy, shitty guitar tones, and what's the worst thing about it is the drums. Now Mangini's drumming is fine. Kinda robotic, but it's fine, but the fucking sound of it is beyond horrible. It's some of the worst overproduced drums I've ever heard. Honestly, the whole middle of the album's kind of bland, but there's some good moments even in the middle that are just kind of sprinkled about like some Parmesan. Its saving grace though is that it really opens and ends with really strong songs, one of them being the opening killer single with a music video called The Enemy Inside, which was actually a song based on soldiers with PTSD. The music video is great. They interview a bunch of soldiers and whatnot. And that's one of their best fucking songs, especially of this era.
I had nightmares about reoccurring events, not the actual event, but how I could recreate it and do things differently.
I don't think people took my cry for help seriously. You lose a piece of your soul out there. Who can come back and try to live their lives like nothing happened?
Then, when you think that's strong, they end it with a song that is beyond amazing. Another incredible suite. And this one is one of their best by far, even though the vocals are and the production is terrible. The riffs are amazing, and there's some amazing orchestration throughout it. Not just keyboards, we're talking actual orchestras. In fact, the middle of the song goes dead silent to allow for an entire orchestral piece. Speaking of the orchestra, they actually had 2 live albums kind of around this time, Live at Luna Park and Breaking the Fourth Wall, which that one actually had straight up orchestra and choir, and their version that they did of this song on there was fucking awesome. This whole orchestration thing, as well as the beginning of the album, which had a lot of cool orchestration stuff on the keyboard, was very much a sign, actually more of a warning of what was to come.
Dream Theater's had a long career.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of different things. This is what we're going to do now.
So the Astonishing, or the Astonishing, I used to call it back when I hated it and thought this album was a big pile of shit and the worst thing that they ever made, which is usually the consensus from the fans. But you know what? Although it's probably the last one I'd listened to from the band, and I will continue to listen to the least, I've recently looked through it in a different set of lenses. Quite literally, as you can see. Of course, Dream Theater should be delivering us progressive metal albums, but they did decide to do something different with it. So for the Astonishing, let's kind of do like a pros and cons thing. I can show you kind of why I'm in the middle of this album nowadays. So the first thing is, of course, they did something completely different. The last couple albums, they were, especially Dramatic Turn of Events, repeating the same thing. And self-titled Dream Theater, they tried to do things different, but it just wasn't working. It still felt tired. This one, they did something completely different. You couldn't even compare this to any album they'd ever done. The only thing about it that's comparable is that it still has that weird production style from the self-titled, although the guitars don't sound as bad, the drums still sound pretty terrible. A lot of people, when this first came out, thought this should definitely be some sort of concept album, more like Scenes from a Memory. But it's not that. That's kind of the different lens I'm looking at it through now, is that this is actually more so designed as a soundtrack type album for a movie or story that's never really been done, which is pretty different. And all the music more so follows like a Broadway style as opposed to actual just progressive metal songs. Sure, there's moments of that, but most of this album is definitely written around John Petrucci's guitar and Jordan Rudess's piano. You can tell that Jordan probably wrote a bulk of the music on here, especially all the ballad type stuff. And John wrote most of this stuff on acoustic guitar. Sure, there's a couple heavy moments sprinkled about, like some Parmigiano and Arschetti, but like I said, most of it's pretty stripped down. That's another thing. To people that hate Dream Theater for what they are, this is the absolute least wankiest album. Sure, there's a couple songs, like I said, here and there. If you really will not sign on to the idea of Dream Theater playing progressive music or playing any sort of wanky stuff, go for this album, because although it's kind of a pro and con, this album is not very progressive at all. Maybe a couple moments here and there, but it's damn near not Dream Theater. But like I said, that's kind of a pro, because for what they're trying to do, a more symphonic type fucking soundtrack Broadway piece all the way through, it's actually pretty damn good for what it is. And although it's very ballad focused, it is, if you look at each individual song, it's actually pretty damn good. Like I said, there's lots and lots of ballads, so when you play the album in whole, a lot of those ballads that you would listen to by themselves and be like, that's a pretty good song, that's a pretty good song, it's a pretty good song, it all starts to run together. And that was one of my biggest problems initially, and it still kind of is a problem. If you listen to this album front to back, which I would actually, although it's meant to be some sort of soundtrack, I would actually argue do not listen to it that way. I would listen to it in pieces, or else it becomes fucking tiring. The reason it becomes tiring is because the fucking album is damn near 2 hours, maybe even 2.5 hours. It is absolutely fucking endless. Not even a movie, like a Disney movie, like The Little Mermaid or something, would have the movie as long as this fucking soundtrack. The biggest problem is that they should have cut this down to maybe an hour in length. And that's maybe, because if you did like a Broadway performance of this whole thing, there's no fucking way in hell you're doing 2.5 hours of it. The story's okay. It's, I think, maybe better than Scenes from Memory because it's not as stupid. It's more convoluted and lengthy, has more characters, but it has too many characters. Cut some of them out, streamline the story, and another problem with the story is that it's kind of a ripoff of 2112, but it has a beginning, middle, and end, and you could argue that the story kind of deserves to be long this time around, but the same problem happens with Scenes from Memory where the story is stretched out forever, and they stretch it out by including too many fucking characters. They say every fucking piece of the story in the music, and the lyrics become jarring as hell. And with Jordan and John being pretty much the only songwriters of this whole thing, it opens up a huge can of worms, especially lyrically, because let's be honest, John's not that great of a lyric writer, and Mike and other people that in the band were usually kind of the better lyricists. His lyrics are way too goddamn blunt, and in this type of scenario, as a whole concept story thing, it really sucks the life out of it. It's way too goddamn wordy. He walked over here, he did this, he fought the battle, and then he talked to this person. Be a little bit more dreamy with it. Take some notes from Ronnie James Dio and paint pictures with words. Those are good lyrics. Another problem with it being completely stretched out forever is that there's tons and tons and tons of reprises, which I don't have a problem with, except for the fact that with 2.5 hours in length, you're thinking, do we really need to hear this theme again? Do we really need to hear a song that was literally just a repeat of one of the other songs earlier again? Get the fuck on with it. And if you're someone that absolutely cannot stand Dream Theater being not Dream Theater damn well at all, then this album will be absolute blasphemy. And I still think as a Dream Theater album, it's terrible. But like I said, as a soundtrack, it's not too bad, but it is so dauntingly long. They couldn't even fit this entire fucking album on the road. So you knew that that was already a problem, that this album was too goddamn long. They tried to play the whole thing and fucking couldn't. They literally had to grab iPads to sight read music song for song because there's no way in hell they could memorize all this. It was just too fucking much. Now my favorite song on the album has to be the incredibly Disney sounding song, Our New World. My biggest problem with the song though is that it has a guest vocal appearance from Lizzie Hale, a singer from a band called Hailstorm, a band that people only like because the singer a girl, but it's a good song nonetheless. And instead of moving on to something else, maybe even correcting the mistakes right away, they instead decided to do an anniversary tour of Images and Words. Number one, James's voice cannot handle these songs. The smart thing to do would be for James to maybe sing them fucking differently, which James can still sing decently, but he keeps trying to strain through these fucking notes he cannot hit, especially with songs from Images and Words, and it just sounds like complete shit. Another problem is I do not like the idea of bands doing anniversary tours of albums where they play the whole thing through without the lineup that made the album. Jordan is one thing, but if you're gonna tour Images and Words, you really should have Mike Portnoy there. I think most Dream Theater fans kind of agree with that. Obviously Kevin would never agree, but at least bring back the drummer that would agree to play the whole album through. It just feels completely disingenuous, and even though Mike Mangini is a great drummer, he really did butcher a lot of those songs. The good news though is that Dream Theater did try to correct the mistake that many saw as the Astonishing, I used to call it, by doing something completely opposite, going back to an actual progressive metal sound, maybe incorporate some sounds of old, some sounds of new, incorporate it as a whole band effort, and the biggest cherry on top, write something that is short.
Before we went in to start writing, we definitely talked about having an album that was like in the hour runtime mark, which is kind of a challenge because we tend to write longer songs, we tend to always have so much material. But we thought having something that you could listen to in one sitting, you know, at the gym or in a car drive or on the train or something, would be great for a change. And we haven't done that since Images and Words.
This is one of those rare moments that, once again, I'd recommend to a Dream Theater fan that wants what Dream Theater is, but in a more toned down style. I would say go for this one. Honestly, I'd say that maybe this is better than Dramatic Turn of Events, and quite possibly the best album they've done since Black Clouds and Silver Linings. And it's different, and it's streamlined, and it's stripped down in places, and it's not as wanky, and it's creative, it's different. It brings back just enough of old, and it's short. Some people are still complaining about it, and I can see why. I mean, after the Astonishing, everyone's still crying for Mike Mangini's head and for the rest of the band to maybe even hang it up. The first single we were given was the first track on the album, Untethered Angels, which a lot of people were complaining about as it was generic and whatnot. You know what? I actually kind of liked it. I liked the riffs. I liked the chorus. I thought it was definitely more of the old Dream Theater of old, kind of around the Black Clouds era. And it was something that it wasn't great, but it was a lot more inviting than the Astonishing. It was getting back to something. It was a little bit less in length as well. The wanky sections were kind of generic, but they were a lot shorter. It was mostly focused on the actual song. Then we had Fall Into the Light, which had a badass riff, and it was more so about the actual musicality and not the technicality. And then we were given a weird single called Paralyzed, which I still think is probably the second weakest song on the album, which is kind of an moment. It's different, but it sounds like weird commercial hard rock, like Five Finger Death Punch type shit. It doesn't stick too well, but after several listens, I think it is kind of catchy, and it would definitely be on the radio, but it should not be on a Dream Theater album. Well, songs like Barstool Warrior, it's actually a tasteful piece of old. This actually feels directly from Images and Words, and it has that more jazzy, dreamy vibe that whole album had. Then we get a badass song that's clearly written by John Mayhew called S2N, which is easily one of the standouts of the album. I was kind of worried about the album until I hit this point. I'm like, okay, we're gonna be safe. This song is one of the best ones. This is doing something different. This is doing something funky and progressive at the same time, and it's incorporated perfectly in the Dream Theater style. This is what the self-titled should have been. The last three songs, two of them being great epic songs. Pale Blue Dot, which is the final song, is a pretty cool and different one. It's very dark and atmospheric in places, and my favorite goddamn song from the album. I would say the best song since maybe shit from Black Clouds. I'd say maybe even better than The Best of Times. One of their best songs they've ever fucking done, and I couldn't believe how amazing it was. At Wits End. A song that was lyrically made by James LaBrie. But what really makes the song strong is the badass riffs in it and the amazing Dream Theater of old mixing with some Dream Theater of new, and it actually being successful this time around. A lot of people will agree that it's definitely a big step up over the Astonishing, and that it is a good thing that they're trying to strip things down. They're trying to do some different things while mixing in the good of old. And even the people that don't like this album will agree that it is at least a step in the right direction, even if they don't like it. That ends probably the longest single episode I've ever fucking done on any band, and I could bet that it's going to be that way for a goddamn while, because there's so much history, so much music, so much stuff to get into, and hopefully I've gotten people that are not really keen on the idea of Dream Theater to open their eyes, Nicholas, to realize that the band is not as bad as a lot of people advertise that they are. In fact, in many instances, they're some of the best songwriters on the planet, not just because they're these technical wizards. At the end of the day, technical doesn't mean good, and stripped down doesn't necessarily mean good. At the end of the day, good music is good music. And if you ignore all the politics of things and throw out all this stupid shit of like, I need stuff that's simplistic and raw, and I need shit that's technical and polished, Dream Theater are really great songwriters. Few people can actually write a really long song like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence and make it work. And although I personally prefer to have Mike Portnoy in the band and hope maybe someday he'll return because I think of him as such a great songwriter, if they don't have him back and it just continues on the way it is and they make albums as good as Distance over time, I'll be fine with that too. At the end of the day, even if they hang it up or will make shitty albums after this, Dream Theater has cemented a legacy that is absolutely undeniable. With Mike Portnoy and even with some of the material with Mike Mangini, they have really proven themselves not only as technical musicians that just write wank, but as actual songwriters.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.